So talking about knowledge, economy and knowledge and resource base, that is all building into what I'm going to say today. And also the resource-based innovation and growth has been mentioned by my first colleague, Dr. Ibrahim. And then the subsequent colleague also have talked about some other aspect I'm looking at about the poor, about policy support for the poor, informal sector, and inclusivity. So I'll take advantage of those and try not to repeat some of the ideas that come from that. So in this presentation, I'm looking at, although today is for Sudan, but this is Africa, so this is a presentation about policy support, looking at inclusive innovation and grassroots innovation in Nigerian context and how policy is supporting or not supporting that. So policy has come across in the two presentations prior to mine as well. So I'll cover this. I'll look at the tensions between policy in developing countries, either policies to support mission-oriented big innovation projects or grassroots inclusive and innovation projects, and then introduce it in the paper. Also, I spent a lot of time on conceptual clarity on what inclusive innovation is, what grassroots innovation is, so, and then methodology. I'll run straight as fast as I can to the findings and discuss the contributions, if that's okay. I see a lot of faces getting tired already. So these are some backgrounds just to put some perspective on Nigeria, to say how things have developed, what has happened, what has not happened. It used to be the second largest economy in Africa, and now is the first because things have been rebased, which is some economic terms for recalculation and then we have a lot more data on the competitiveness and so many other things. But the key part I want to say is there's a big contribution. Why this is important is because there's a big contribution in this rebasement that turned the country to number one based on some sectors that were not being accounted for. And those involve a lot of grassroots inclusive innovation projects which are happening in the movie industry, for example. So that's important how this links into the big picture. And then we see how there was a big news about that, how the economy jumped, the abracadabra that happened, how it grew from 89% overnight. Actually didn't, is because they recalculated what has been happening for a while over that. It didn't happen only in Africa, in Nigeria, a few other countries in the continent are also doing that now, to actually recalculate the economy and recalculate what is happening so we can see. And then, as a result of the progress that has been happening over the years in Nigeria, we have after BRICS, there was a big initiative to say, so what is the next big thing going to happen? So we have the main countries, which Nigeria was included in that. So you have Mexico, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey, called the main big thing. So it's like, we've moved away from G20, G17, G5 to BRICS. After BRICS, these are the things going on the basis that if the growth and the patterns currently continues, we're likely to have these economies turn up like this. So, but beyond the good news, beyond those projections and those forecasts, we see a big policy dilemma in most of the countries in Africa I've studied and in developing countries in general. And this problem is, what kind of innovation projects do we support? Do we support the big mission-oriented projects to go put a man on the space or on the moon? Or do we support innovation targeted at grassroots, which is, in Nigeria's case, we have space project, and then they also have about 40, 50 million people doing agriculture. So there's this tension between which one do we do, how do we do it? So the question is, do we do one, do we not do one? There's space going on, they're doing one, but we're seeing less and less, as Gordon spoke as well before. So with the petroleum means less interest and less interest on agriculture and other sectors because of the focus on. But then if we look at it, we see the space, petroleum creating less than 5% of jobs, less than 5% of economic, 95% of economic production from a contribution into GDP from petroleum, but the jobs are very small. So that dilemma, I kind of try to detangle it. This slide deals with that as well, saying these are the two things. So the pressure on developing countries to say, oh, we have to move, we have to catch up, we have to, I use leapfrog and catch up because I have issues with those terms, so that's why I put them in this. But this is what we have in literature. This is how people refer to that developing countries are trying to catch up. So that tension to catch up is what do we do? And sometimes we see a scramble between different policies on how to policy somersault and responses that are not well thought out, well prepared in order to get to that. In the paper, I defined grassroots innovation as a form of innovation for inclusive development. So in this context, we're looking at innovation as a tool, as a mechanism for development, which is inclusive, which will include both the rich and the poor and the high society, formal sectors, informal sector, which again has come out in some of my colleagues, the previous colleague mentioned that. So the key point is, what are the research question are looking at what are the possible impediments to innovation and innovation support. So the purpose of the paper was really to examine how government is supporting innovation on the grassroots level. So grassroots innovation, and see if there's been change or no change, or how this is progressing. I'll keep one eye on the time. Okay. Oops. Okay. In the literature, we'll see a big difference between how innovation, grassroots innovation and inclusive innovation is defined and addressed in the North and the South. The North being the Western countries and the South being developing countries. How in one side is a means of survival, in the other side is kind of more social, less attention, because there's really, the need is not there to a large extent. So I deal with this a lot in the paper and try to create some conceptual differences between that. And so we see tensions between the practitioner approach and the academic, and things like that. Generally, some theories are beginning to emerge, but it's still not enough on how it's defined. So a lot of the work going on in Sussex is slightly different from what is happening in India, where I was in January, February at an OECD conference to see what the ideas coming out are. But what is happening is innovation at grassroots is still happening. The terminologies used in defining it or describing it may not be the same in China or Nigeria or Sudan or India, but we have evidences and traces of that going on. So in order to see what policies are available and how those policies influence them, I had to look at the Nigerian innovation policies currently. What are the policies saying? Are they referring to that? There's a similar work we're doing now on STISA, which is the African Union policy. Does it address innovation at grassroots level? Does it address inclusive innovation? To how? To what extent? So those are the questions we're looking at. Due to the lack of conceptual clarity on how currently what happens is grassroots innovation is referred to by many terms. So there's many terminologies used to define the same thing. So you have pro-poor, you have bottom of the pyramids, you have reverse innovation, you have below the radar innovation, all kind of words, all kind of terminologies referring to the same thing. So in the paper, I make these the distinctions and create a framework from that. I break inclusive innovation and grassroots innovation into 4 columns and then provide the characteristics there. So there is innovation from grassroots, there is innovation for grassroots, which are innovation design, but then targeted at people in the low, poor, rural areas. And then there is innovation at grassroots happening. And you also have innovation by grassroots people themselves, what they're doing in order to promote that. Then based on that general definition, I provide the characteristics. So traditionally, what we know as inclusive innovation or grassroots innovation is the column 1 at the extreme left, where you have, this is innovation by poor people, by common people, it's painted with that kind of approach. But we see the evidence doesn't support that, because we see now companies and big corporations now involved. We see people with PhDs, with specialists. We see NGOs now included in this, in an inclusive innovation project. And then the traditional approach as well is that the knowledge is informal. So it's just local people doing it. They use traditional knowledges. And that is not true from the evidence we have now. So in some cases, you see informal knowledge mixed with formal knowledge. You see informal institutions working with formal institutions as well. And those collaborations are going on. So we see some of the work happening from the communities are being now taken up by research institutes. And then they're looking at how to commercialize them, how to scale them up, and how to make those things bigger, create bigger markets, bigger marketing opportunities at international, global level as well. So this is part of the framework that is still being presented in the paper, but it's developed a lot more now based on further evidence and testing this, not in Nigeria alone, in other places. We're just finishing a work now in South Africa where this is also being applied to see how it applies, what are the relationships in those environments. And the methodology, I've said, we looked at a lot of literature review, massive literature review on that. We followed secondary data, and then I examined some grassroots cases. Actually, went and looked at how I present some examples here. We know the computer village where there's a lot of jobs created in Lagos and some places. Innovation is taking place, a whole village without government support, without policy support, but they do a lot of work. And we have Bros, Canston, so many of these projects by communities, now research institutions. There is a leather tanning institute now directly working with locals where they skin and do this kind of projects on innovation level. Bringing all of them down, I found some characteristics on the type of innovation. So we see innovation led by poor people. We see innovation mixed with the bottom line is all tended to sustainability, looking at how to solve local problems and how to focus on economic and development opportunities. The knowledge acquisition, I've said, is we see formal and informal knowledge getting mixed. Some are formal, very few formal knowledge working alone, but we see a lot of informal knowledge and formal knowledge mixing. But then the type of innovation we will see is more on technology, in product and processes. Less innovation in organizational kind of innovation and marketing innovation, which is, again, we need to look at that. Except in some areas, in the movie industry where they're now launching in the UK and doing premieres all over the world, we see a lot of organizational innovation happening in those areas. So this is summarizing the 3 cases, okay? So innovation, observe the method. So I've touched on some of this, so I won't go back into it. But the evidence is showing that there's a lot of existence of grassroots innovation, inclusive innovation, both in Nigeria. I will expect the same thing in Sudan and other parts. I have evidence now from South Africa and a few other places I've studied, not yet Sudan, but these are, the names will be different, how they're referred, how they're conceptualized within those environments might be different. But we see, based on those evidence, we're now arguing that it's not worth ignoring them anymore, because you can either formulate policies to deal with 5% of the country or deal with 40 or 50% of the country. So it's not wise to ignore this and not include them in government and national policy anymore. We see predominance of informal knowledge, like I've said. And then the question remains, in what ways can policies help? In what ways should policy be supporting this? We see the role of research and research institutions in the first point here, in defining, conceptualizing those, and developing a framework. The importance of this, or the problem that was going on before we have this, is that because everything is referred to with the last column, then everybody publishing tend to refer to grassroots innovation, mixing everything up. So in the future, knowledge accumulation becomes a challenge because you can't build on. So if you're referring to grassroots GRI arts, innovation at grassroots, you're not clear whether it's referring to the ones by or the so. So the advantage of that is here now we have research institutions that focus on specific type of grassroots or inclusive innovation, so we can accumulate knowledge in individual areas. In the future, we can also develop databases that can actually capture and map them. And also, it's then possible to see if an innovation, a grassroots innovation started at innovation at grassroots. Over the years, do they move to innovation for grassroots? Or are there changes? Are they cross-pollinating each other or linking to each other? So I think 1 or 2 more slides. Yeah, so that's it. So this is, again, areas that policy support could help in scaling up, in research, in funding the education and research, in blending formal and informal knowledge sources, for example, in bringing the institutions together. So we see a lot of gaps where policy is not targeted at the current time, and which would be a big opportunity for that. But for that to happen, research institutions also have a lot of roles to play in knowledge, in communication, in producing the data, the evidence. One of the points coming across from policymakers was, we don't really know what to support yet. Until they can count it, they can measure it, they can say this is what it is, it's difficult for them to develop policies to target them. And so we see a big role that research and knowledge centers can play. So in conclusion, the tension has remained, the tension remains between do we go here or do we go here, but research institutions and this community can help in saying there is a middle way we can go, and this is how to get there. This is what the role that research can play. This is where policy should target, how policy will be effective in what specific areas. So improvement in this regard is key, and I will think similarly, targeting the same, again, referring to the two colleagues before me, that this is a big area of policy, like in housing or in development or in knowledge production, dissemination, and management. Thank you.